What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. It is time to give you my preview and my official prediction on the Round 1 college football playoff matchup between the number 11 seeded SMU Mustangs and the number 6 seeded Penn State Nittany Lions. So I'm going to give you my official preview on this playoff matchup and then also give you my official prediction for the Round 1 playoff matchup between these two teams. Going to do every single first round game. Yesterday we did Indiana and Notre Dame. If you have not seen that video, be sure to go back and check it out right here on the channel. Tomorrow we got Clemson and Texas, and then we'll close things out on Thursday with Tennessee and Ohio State. So I'm going to go ahead and give you my prediction here for Penn State and SMU. Going to go through the stats here, show you both stats for both teams, and then we'll take a look at the preview of this game of what time the game will be and see who the favorite going into this game is. And then also we'll take a look at both teams' previous 5 games from 2024. And then I'll give you my prediction at the end of this video of how I think the game's going to go down. So let's go ahead and jump right into it here with this preview and prediction on the Round 1 college football playoff matchup, again between SMU and Penn State. So we'll start with stats here for both of these teams. So we'll start here with SMU. First off, in points per game on the offensive side of the football, this team averaging 29 points per game. So you may be thinking that's not really a good number there for SMU. You think their offense is very terrible, but it really isn't. You know, SMU's offense can score points. They're not really an explosive offense, but they're overall, you know, in the 400-yard mark in total yards per game, as you're seeing it on the offensive side of the football. On the offensive side of the football in total yards per game, this team averaging 408 yards per game on the offensive side of the football. Again, this is not the most explosive offense in the country. I mean, according to the ranking, they are in the top 20. So, yeah, that's really good news there for SMU. They're a pretty good offensive team, and they can score points sometimes here or there. And then passing yards per game, this is a really explosive passing attack team. This team averaging 308 yards per passing. You look at the quarterback, Kevin Jennings has had a pretty phenomenal season for SMU. You look at his numbers, 3,050 yards on the season, 22 touchdown passes, and then 8 interceptions. And he wasn't even projected to be the starter in the offseason. They had a different quarterback. I don't know what happened with the starting quarterback, if I can't remember correctly. I think he went down with the injury, if I'm not mistaken, but Kevin Jennings has really stepped up pretty well here for this SMU team. I think he definitely has a bright future here at quarterback for this SMU team as well. You look at the rushing yards per game for SMU. This is a team that is not really explosive in the running game. This team only averaging 100 yards per rushing on the ground. So this is more of a passing attack offense than it is a running attack offense, but they have a really good running back in Brashawn Smith. Brashawn Smith, 1,270 yards on the season with 14 touchdowns and then overall 217 carries. Yeah, he's one of the most underrated running backs in the country, in my opinion, and definitely the most underrated running back in the ACC as well. So, yeah, the rushing game is not really the best for SMU, but they have a really good running back in Brashawn Smith. So that's the only really good player on that running back position for SMU. You look at the defensive side of the football for SMU, they're giving up 150 yards of passing allowed in the secondary. So this is a really good, decent SMU secondary that could stop the passing game really well. In rushing yards allowed per game, this team giving up 148 yards of rushing. So maybe the defensive line is a little bit of a weakness for SMU, but this is overall a pretty decent defense that SMU has. And then offensively and defensively in the rankings, they're 20th on offense. So just like I said, they're at least a top 20 offense in the country. Again, they're not a really explosive offensive team, but they will score a ton of points sometimes here or there. And then defensively in the rankings, this team is 28th on defense. So not the most talented defense in the country either, but sometimes they will make stops in the passing game, and also the secondary, like I said, might be the strength of this team. And maybe the defensive line is a little bit of a weakness, but that is the stats there for SMU. Let's now move on to Penn State. Penn State, this is a team that's averaging 33.6 points per game. So this is a much more explosive Penn State offense that they've had in recent years. In total yards per game on the offensive side of the football, this team averaging 448.6 yards per game on the offensive side of the football. So like I said, that's a really high number there for this Penn State team. Last year, they were definitely, not really an explosive offensive team, but this year that has really changed with a new offensive coordinator and everything. In passing yards per game, this team is 246.5 yards in the passing game. You look at Drew Aller, a veteran experienced quarterback that made his first time year as a starter. He is 21-5 as a career starter for Penn State. You look at his numbers, they're much more better compared to last year. He's got 2,894 yards of passing, 21 touchdown passes, and then 7 interceptions. So he's also been taking care of the football pretty well. It's more interceptions than they were from last year, but he's still taking care of the football pretty well. And then you look at the rushing yards per game. This is a Penn State team that can run the football pretty well. That's where their offense really is explosive at. The running game is really good for them. 202.2 yards of rushing on the ground. Of course, Nick Singleton is one of the best underrated quarterbacks the running backs in the Big Ten, I should say. 131 carries on the year, 838 yards of rushing, and 7 rushing touchdowns. And he's definitely underrated as a running back position there for Penn State. In the defensive side of the football, this team allowing 282.1 yards of passing in the secondary. That's a very high number, so the secondary might be a weakness for Penn State as I'm looking at it here for both of these teams. Rushing yards allowed, though, this team only gives up 103.6 yards of rushing allowed on the ground, so this is a really good defensive line that Penn State has. They can get after the running back, they can also get after the quarterback as well. But you look at both sides of the football in the rankings. They're 15th on offense, so again, they're not really inside the top 10 on offense, but that's a better offensive ranking compared to last year. And then defensively on the ranking spot, they're 6th in the country on defense, so this has always been a top 10 defensive team that they've had in recent years, but they also have been not really the best on the offensive side of the football, but this is like one of the best offenses they've had in a while. So you look at these stats here for both of these teams and the advantage-wise, Penn State definitely is averaging more offensive yards per game, but I think both offenses are pretty even. Passing yards per game, that's a big advantage for SMU. The running game is definitely a big advantage here for Penn State. And then you look at the passing yards allowed. That's a big advantage for SMU. So again, the weakness for both of these teams, for SMU, it might be, running against the rushing attack. They're not really good at stopping the run, and then the secondary for Penn State might be the weakness there. But yeah, I think both teams are, pretty even in offensive-wise, but defensively, Penn State really is the better defense here, and they also definitely have a more talent advantage compared to SMU as well. So these are the stats here. Let's now move on to the full preview of this college football playoff round 1 matchup here between SMU and Penn State. The game's going to be on Saturday, December 21st at 12 o'clock Eastern Time, also known as noon Eastern Time, and it will be on TNT. So that'll be very interesting watching a couple of games coming up on TNT this weekend. And this is like the first game out of the triple header on Saturday, December the 21st. Spread going in favor of Penn State here by 8.5, which doesn't really surprise a lot of people, to be honest. And then the over and under is at 53.5. So Penn State, of course, will have the home field advantage here. These are two 11-2 teams. Both teams are pretty similar, coming off, conference championship losses from a couple of weeks ago. SMU lost to Clemson 34-31. Penn State lost to Oregon, the number 1 ranked team in the country, 45-37. So both of these teams are pretty similar. You look at the FBI, the matchup predictor is giving Penn State the advantage here by not a very big margin, but it's pretty much a big margin here because Penn State is playing at home. The FBI does favor Penn State. They give them about a 69% chance to win this one. And then for SMU, it's at 31%. So the matchup predictor really likes SMU here, which really doesn't surprise me a lot because Penn State is playing at home in this one. And I tell you what, this is going to be a very tough game for SMU because they have never played in a really tough environment at all this year, maybe except for maybe this, conference championship game. But again, they haven't really played an easy schedule this year as well. So yeah, this is why, I think it could be a really tough game here for SMU. But we have seen Penn State under James Franklin in, recent years now, and also mainly going into this year in big games. Penn State cannot win those big games, and we've seen that, of course, over the course of the career of James Franklin. Against Ohio State and Michigan, he's not been able to win those games, and he's 1-14 in big games all time under Penn State being the head coach. So I think this is a very important game here for both of these teams because if you look at the playoff path for both of these teams, they have the easiest path to get into the national championship, in my opinion. Basically the semifinals, because the winner of this game will take on Boise State in the quarterfinals, the number 3 seed, obviously. And then once you beat Boise State, you can get to the semifinals pretty easily, but you're going to have to play Georgia, Indiana, or Notre Dame in the semifinals in case that does happen. So, yeah, a very important game here for both of these teams. Both of these teams, I think, have the easiest path in the college football playoff. And again, both teams come in 11-2, so they're pretty similar in record-wise. Schedule-wise, Penn State's had a pretty tougher schedule this year than SMU. But again, Penn State is favored here in this one because they are playing at home. And again, it will be at noon Eastern time, so it's a really early kickoff here for SMU State. But for Penn State, they're kind of used to it. And it's also going to be really cold here because this game, of course, will be held in Pennsylvania. And this is a December game. We don't really get a lot of college football games in the month of December. Let's now move on to the previous game comparisons here for both teams. We'll start with SMU first. They come in with a record of 11-2. Remember, SMU lost one game in the regular season, and that was to BYU in the non-conference. They lost that game at home back on September 6th, and they went on a winning streak the rest of the way in the regular season until that conference championship game. First off, they defeated Pittsburgh 48-25 back on November 2nd, defeated Boston College 38-28 on November 16th, defeated Virginia on the road 33-7 on November 23rd, and then they took care of business against California 38-6 in that last game of the regular season on November 30th. And then just a couple weeks ago, they lost to Clemson in a really close one in the conference championship game 34-31. So yeah, that was a tough loss there for SMU, but you got to remember back in that game, they were down by a couple of touchdowns, I believe, in the first half. And it looked like Clemson probably would have run away with this one by 30-plus points. But SMU nearly came back in this game. If SMU would have lost to Clemson by a couple of touchdowns, maybe also by more than couple touchdowns, maybe 17 or over 20 points, they probably would have been out of the college football playoff. And we probably would have been talking about, Alabama instead of, SMU, to be honest. But SMU is very lucky to come back in that game and make it a little bit closer than what the score looked like in the first half. For Penn State, they also come in with a record of 11-2. Of course, their one loss in the regular season came to Ohio State at home 20-13. But first off, they defeated Washington 35-6 back on November 9th. Defeated Purdue here on the road 49-10. Defeated Minnesota in a pretty close trap game there, 26-25. And then after that, they took care of business against Maryland 44-7 in the last game of the regular season. And with them winning out and Ohio State losing there on November 30th, they were able to get to the Big Ten Championship. They were competitive, but they lost to Oregon here 45-37. So again, like I said, both teams pretty similar in schedule-wise. In the conference championship weekend, they lost both of their games by one possession. So let's now get into my prediction here for this round one playoff matchup between SMU and Penn State. I already done my graphic there saying what the score is going to be, but before I talk about the score here, I think this is going to be a decent amount of points. I don't really think it's going to be a shootout here between these two teams. I think Penn State's defense is not going to allow SMU to score a lot of points in this one, but I think SMU will score a touchdown here or two or there. Maybe both teams probably can trade field goals, to be honest, but I think in the second half is where both teams start to get going on the offensive side of the football. Turnovers also will be a big key here for SMU on the defensive side of the football. If SMU can force some turnovers on the offensive side of the football for Penn State, they might have a chance to win this game. And they also got to get that running game going. If they can get their star running back in Smith plenty of carries in this game and give him plenty of wide open holes on the offensive side of the football, then yeah, SMU might be able to run away with this one. But I like Penn State's running game a little bit more, and I also like the talent of this Penn State team as well. And I think Penn State definitely has nothing to lose here. They want to, win a big game here, and they want to at least get to the quarterfinals of the college football playoff. So I am going with Penn State here in a close, low-scoring defensive battle by a decent amount. But, it's a decent amount of points between both of these teams. I'm going Penn State, though, 28-24. So that is my prediction here for this round one playoff game between the number number 11 seeded SMU Mustangs and the number 6 seeded Penn State Nittany Lions. Give me your comments down below. Who do you think wins this game? And give me your score prediction down in the comments below as well. Thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports YouTube channel.